Okay, we've started the recording. So, hi everyone. Thank you again for coming. My name is Zeph, and I am a member specialist here at LibraryThing and TinyCat. So today we're having a bit of a special webinar. Usually, this TinyCat webinar is focused on the TinyCat product and how people can use it to share their library and all the settings that you can pick from with that. But today we're going to be focusing specifically on something that usually happens before you start setting up your settings in TinyCat, and that's the cataloging process. And that's getting all of your books and other items loaded into LibraryThing, and we'll talk about the difference between those today, so that you can share it through TinyCat later. Okay, so we're gonna go for about an hour. There is a chance that this will go over the hour. And since it's a special webinar, I'm not gonna stop it if we start to go over. At a certain point, I'll stop it, but there is a chance that this will go over the usual hour. So please feel free to drop off if you need to. Again, this webinar is being recorded, and that recording should be up on our YouTube channel pretty shortly here after this is done. And I'll go ahead and put our YouTube channel link in the chat here. And for those who joined a little later, here is my email again in the chat. So please feel free to reach out there if you have any questions that we don't get to today, or if there's anything you'd like me to return to in more detail outside of what's recorded here. So again, we're going to focus less on TinyCat and more on LibraryThing today. I'm going to cover all of the different options that you have when you're cataloging your library and getting your LibraryThing account set up for your TinyCat. And then hopefully we'll have time for questions at the end. Okay, so first and foremost, I've mentioned two separate websites here, right? I've talked about TinyCat, and this is a TinyCat webinar after all, but I've also mentioned LibraryThing. And so, what is the difference between these two? So, TinyCat is a catalog for small libraries. So it's something you can set up for your library so that your patrons and even like volunteers or other staff members at your library can access your catalog in like a sleek and kind of professional way. You can also include options for them to circulate items or for you to circulate items for them, like checking things in and out. So it's a really nice and professional way to share a catalog. And TinyCat is a paid subscription. And that price varies depending on your library type and size. And then LibraryThing is a giant book website with lots going on, and we're going to talk about it a bunch today. But for TinyCat, LibraryThing acts like your database. So it's where all of the book records and other item records that you create and manage live. They all live in LibraryThing. That's where you go to create, to edit, and to delete any of those records. And TinyCat just sits on top of those records, right? It's sort of like an add-on. It's a layer over them to make it a little bit more professional and a little easier to peruse. So the two accounts are intrinsically linked. So you're only going to have one account, and that account will be for both your LibraryThing account and your TinyCat add-on to it. Okay. So we're going to focus less on TinyCat today and more on LibraryThing, which is where all of your cataloging again happens for TinyCat. So first, I want to just talk a little bit more about what LibraryThing is. So, LibraryThing is a website that started just over 20 years ago, which is pretty nifty. It's older than MySpace, if you can believe it. And it started as a place for people to catalog their libraries, whether those are personal and private libraries or public libraries, right? And it's now branched off and it is doing a lot of different things. One of those things is that it is serving as a database for TinyCat libraries, right? We've talked about that already. It's doing a lot of other things though, and most of the people in LibraryThing aren't also TinyCat customers, as much as I wish they were. So what other things do we have in LibraryThing? I want to point out sort of some other resources you might use before we dive right into cataloging, okay? So right here on the home page, I can see some useful information about my profile. This charts and graphs tab Once you've cataloged your library, which we're going to talk about how to do that today, this charts and graphs tab will have a bunch of really useful visuals and numbers and other statistics about your collections that can be really useful both for your patrons and also like for your funding or any sort of reports you might need to generate. We have a recommendations tab here for you, and that will look at all the items that you've cataloged already, and it will essentially look through all of the things in LibraryThing and make some really smart recommendations for you. Um, and so when you go to this tab, you'll be able to filter a bit, but it does have some things that you might actually want to acquire. So this could be useful for acquisitions in TinyCat. Like what might our current patrons enjoy that we don't already have? You can also manage your reviews and other things here. So we're going to look at these two tabs a lot today, so I'm going to skip them just for now. But I want to dive over to groups. So talk is like our sort of forum. It's where everyone can talk on LibraryThing with each other. And we do have a TinyCat group on Talk. And this is a great thing to join if you haven't already. So dive into the TinyCat group and be able to that you'll be able to chat with everyone else who uses TinyCat and sort of bounce ideas off of each other, ask questions, and troubleshoot things, that sort of thing. And then on the More tab, we've got a couple things that we'll look at today, especially importing books. But we also have the Library Things store here. So if you need to buy barcode scanners or labels, that's a good place for this. And we also have some games. Trivia Thing lets you play trivia with the items that you've cataloged. So that could be a fun thing to incorporate into your library. So there's lots to explore here. I'm showing you these things because I want you to understand that LibraryThing is doing a lot besides what we're going to look at today, just so that you're aware of what else you're looking at. Because let's be honest, there's a lot to look at, right? It's a pretty busy website. So we're going to talk about getting your books set up, right? And I'm going to say the word books a lot, but I just want to clarify right off the bat that you can catalog a lot more than just books in LibraryThing. You can catalog books, DVDs, CDs, technology, wizard hats. It's up to you. Okay. And I already mentioned that your sign in here, your account and login for LibraryThing is going to be identical to your login for TinyCat. And by that, I mean for your primary administrator to TinyCat. So when you're signing into LibraryThing, either on the website version here or on the app, which is right here, right? Obviously, the app is built for a phone, so it looks kind of funny on my computer, but bear with me. So on either one, when you're signing in, that password that you have is going to grant you access to your whole LibraryThing account, meaning that anyone with that password can edit all of your books or delete all of your books and undo all of your cataloging, right? So it's really important to practice good internet hygiene with that password. You don't want to share it widely, and you may not want to share it at all. And there are other kinds of logins you can create for volunteers and other staff members in TinyCat, but there is only that one sign in for your account on LibraryThing. And it is, again, the main administrator login in TinyCat. Those are the same password. So just be really cautious with that, okay? And you'll see how powerful your LibraryThing password is today as I show you how much you can change and edit in here with that. Okay, so now that that's covered, I want to show you a little bit about this page. This is the Your Books tab up here at the top. If you're following along, please feel free to do so. So here I can see a big table with a bunch of books in it, right? In fact, I see that I have a total of 252 books, and this is showing me the 1st through the 20th of those books. I've got some cover images, I've got some titles, I've got some buttons here that tell me I can manage some things. I could also double click and edit a few things. So there's some actions I can take, but this is kind of where I go to look at the information that's already present. So this is the goal, right? So we're going to talk about how do you get these books in here into LibraryThing. So one of the main organizing principles that's going to come up a lot today is collections. And collections are, here are my current collections in this sample account here. And collections are the main organizing principle for your items in LibraryThing, right? I like to think of them kind of like shelves or maybe like buckets. It's where you're putting your books, really. The difference between physical shelves and buckets is that you can put a book, for example, in multiple collections at the same time. So it could be both in my library and under fiction, right? I don't have anything in that fiction collection right now, but that's fine. So this book could exist in two places at once. Okay. But it's the main organizing structure, and you can use that however you want. You can edit these collections, right? You can create new ones, you can hide existing ones. It's up to you. These are the default ones, and then any you add, you'll see are kind of blue. They have this blue folder icon. So keep that in mind as we go through. There's a lot of other things you can look at and view on this page. You can even change the view on this page. So I'm clicking through the styles here to show you that it's a lot of libraries find it useful to have different styles that show different information in each tab, right? So you can click through those and see what the default is, and you can go to your settings here to edit that as well. And you can also look at your edit history for any changes that you've made to your catalog. And you can manage your tags and do a lot of other stuff from this page. So it's a very, very useful page. You'll spend a lot of time here when you're cataloging. Okay. So now I'm going to take us to this page. And we're now actually starting to discuss how to add books to your catalog. So the cataloging process is beginning now. And there are multiple different ways to do this. So the first way I'm going to show you is probably the slowest way, but it's also one of the simpler ways. It sort of guides you through the whole process. So I'm going to walk us through it nice and slow. I've clicked on the Add Books tab. And now I'm seeing the add books form. And I see some history of books that I've added in the past here on the right side of the screen. So when you're adding books one at a time, and we'll talk about adding books en masse in a bit, when you're adding them one at a time and you're using this form, you're going to start filling this form kind of from the bottom up, which I know is a little silly, but just focus on the idea that we are trying to add the book Great Expectations to our catalog. Okay. So we have that book in our library and we want to add it to our LibraryThing account. So we're cataloging it digitally. So first, we want to pick the source. We're searching for that book, and we get to decide from almost 5,000 different sources of book data where we're pulling the majority of that data from. Okay. So you'll see my pre-selection here was Amazon.com All Media. And I do tend to use that quite a bit for a couple of reasons. One, because I do catalog a lot of audiobooks, and that's a really useful and robust source for audiobook data. They also tend to have certain things formatted in ways that I like. Title is a very important field to me. The capitalization of title, not having extra things in it, that matters a lot to me. And there may be other things that matter a lot to you. So try playing around with different sources. Add a book that you have from a few sources, see how it comes through, and see, what's going to be easiest for you and what you might have to do the least amount of editing after adding. So it's worth playing around. Again, there are almost 5,000 sources. Some are libraries, others are websites like Amazon. There's a lot of different resources here. So one thing to note, if you do choose any of their Amazon sources for a book, you will notice that later on in TinyCat, there will be a little link to that item in Amazon that displays to your patrons. It's pretty discreet. It's like near the bottom of the page usually. But the reason for that is just part of our data agreement with Amazon, right? So it's not something you can hide from that page. So if you don't want that link to Amazon displaying on your TinyCat, just be sure to pick a non-Amazon source here. That's all you need to do to make sure that that's not there, okay? And then you're going to choose what collection the book is going to be added to. So we're adding Great Expectations. And I can show all of these collections. And maybe I just want to add it to my library. Maybe I want to add it to both or just to fiction, right? So you decide that. And then you can choose what tags you want to add. Oh, I should mention, you do have to add every book to at least one collection. Every item in LibraryThing has to exist in at least one collection. Okay. So tags, this is just one item, but we'll see later that you might want to consider maybe adding tags to multiple items. But what are tags? So tags are keywords that you attach to your items, right? You can attach them to multiple items or just a single item if you want to. And they work really well in TinyCat as search terms. So if you know that there's something people are going to be searching that may not be otherwise present in your item data, you can add it as a tag so that it shows up in a search, right? Some libraries use tags in different ways. A lot of libraries use them to sort of supplement subgenres where they may not otherwise exist in LibraryThing. For example, we have some really canonical genres, but maybe that you like you can't really edit the genres that exist in LibraryThing too much, but you can add tags so that a search for something like classics will definitely pull up this book, right? And maybe I want to add something else like English, maybe that's a tag that I use at my library. So again, tags can kind of be whatever you want. They're just keywords that you're adding to your items. So decide how you want to use them and then just make sure you're using them consistently. Okay. And next we're going to just search for the book. Okay, great. And it's pulled up a few different options from my source. And so now my job is to kind of skim through and see which one actually matches the book in my hand the most. So maybe it's not this video and maybe it's not this 2009 edition. But yes, it is this Penguin Classics 2002, right? Or at least this is close enough to the information I care about, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and click the title to add it to my catalog. Okay. And now when I go to my Your Books page, I'll see it right there at the top. And you can reorder this data, but you see it's currently ordered by entry date. So this is right here up at the top for me. Okay. So if we go back to that Add Books page, um, I want to show you that what we just did we're doing on the web version right now, right? But you can also do this same kind of thing in kind of a faster and a little bit more of a fun way using the LibraryThing app. Okay, so let's dive over to the LibraryThing app. Now, before I start in the LibraryThing app, I just want to let you all know that we do have a new LibraryThing app coming. It's been a long time in the wait in the wings here. So I don't know exactly when that's going to be released, but especially those of you watching this recording a bit later on, you may notice that your app looks a bit different from this one, and that's just fine. Hopefully, the majority of what I'm going to say here will still be applicable, but it won't be hard to figure out if not. Okay. So when we're in our app and we've opened our app, we want to first make sure that we're signed into the same account, right? So that looks correct. I can also edit my sources from that page, right? And that's the same account we were just in on the web version. So that's good. Next, we're going to go to Add to Catalog. Okay. So here I can do the same thing I did before, right? I can just search for that book and pull it up, or I can use this barcode scanner. So this is a built-in barcode scanner within the app. And the only thing that this barcode scanner can do at this point, at least, is add books. Okay, so if you scan a book's ISBN barcode with this built-in barcode scanner in the LibraryThing app, then it's going to automatically add that book to your library. Okay, and I'm going to actually show you how it works. So if you're on a phone or a tablet, you're going to tap this little barcode icon and it's going to automatically open your device camera. Okay. Or it might prompt you and ask you for permission to do so. So when it opens that camera, it's going to immediately want to scan whatever it sees. So kind of be careful where you're pointing it. If it's pointing at a barcode that you don't want to scan right now, maybe point it away before you actually open this. And then all you need to do is hold the barcode in front of the camera. I'm going to show you now. So you're actually going to see my face in here for a second because I'm on a computer. So this is going to open my web camera. Okay, so I'm going to click this. And now you guys can see me. Hello, everyone. So I want to add this book to my library, right? And on the back, I do see this barcode for the ISBN, okay? And so I just want to hover this barcode over this red line, and that will add this book to my library. And my webcam's a little fuzzy, so it took a second. It's usually faster than that. And you see it's added it here. And before I scanned it, I could also have edited what collections it was going into, okay? And then when you're done with that, you just click done. So it can be really useful to sort of line up the all the books that you want to catalog on like a big table or on the floor and just sort of walk around with that barcode scanner open and just zap them all in. Okay? It's a great idea for a cataloging party. If you have a lot that you need to catalog and none of it exists already in some other digital place, right? And we're going to talk about what to do if you do already have some sort of digital record of your library, right? Maybe you can import that. But these are ways to add books one at a time because you don't already have a digital record of your catalog. So this is a way to digitize your books, okay? So again, this will only work if your books have an ISBN barcode. If they don't, then you're going to want to search for them by title or add them in one of the other ways that I'm going to talk about. And I should have also mentioned, I do see a few things coming through the chat, and I won't be reading the chat super thoroughly throughout this talk just because we have a lot to cover. But I will return to the chat at the end of the webinar when we return to questions, okay? So thanks for bearing with me. All right, so another thing to note about the app is that there is a lot less you can do in the app, which makes it really good for cataloging parties. Because, like I said, that password to your LibraryThing account is really precious. So you don't want to share it widely, but it's pretty hard to mess things up in the app. So if you have a bunch of people over to help you catalog your library, you can sign them all in to your account on the LibraryThing app, and they can help you add books at the same time. Whereas if and also the app is totally fine with multiple people adding at the same time. Whereas on the web version, excuse me, of LibraryThing, it might get a little tripped up if you have multiple people on multiple devices trying to add books at the same time using the web version. So if you want to do that and have a big cataloging party, I recommend using the app. Okay. All right. So there's another way to add books one at a time, and you'll see it just at the bottom of the add books page. Now, it doesn't exist in the app right now. This is just in the web version. And you just click this add manually button, and it brings you to this page. So if you have a lot of unique books or books that probably don't exist in any of those 5,000 sources we were looking at earlier, this page is going to be really important to you. Um, or otherwise, if you have a lot of technology or wizard hats or whatever else that you're going to circulate that isn't a book, then this page is similarly going to be really important to you. So you might want to bookmark the page. And here you just literally fill out exactly how much information you care about on this page and then click add at the bottom. Okay. That's it. It's really simple. It's really manual, but it definitely takes a bit more time, right? Because you're typing everything. And when you're adding things that aren't books, you'll notice that you're kind of working around LibraryThing's obviously bookish fields, right? So your computer may have an author, or your wizard hat may have a title, right? And that's fine. It'll show up okay in TinyCat. It'll make sense to your patrons, but just work around that as best you can. And it ends up working just fine. Okay. Now, we're going to move away from talking about adding books one at a time, and we're going to start talking about importing books. So, again, adding books one at a time is really useful if you've never digitized your catalog. If you still have a card catalog or maybe no catalog records, then this is a great way to start building those. Okay. But if you already do, maybe you're transferring from another catalog software, right? Maybe you are able to export your old records, and there's a few different types of files that you might get. So we're going to talk about two of the most common ones today. So there's a little import books shortcut here at the bottom of the add books page, but I also want to show you that you can find it by going to more and import books. Okay, and today we're going to talk about MARC import and spreadsheet import. So when I go into spreadsheet import, I see where I can drop my file, and I also have a nice swath of information here on the right, some tips and tricks, and I also have a sample file. So if you click this sample file, it'll open and you'll get a look at it. And this is what it looks like. Now, a few important things about this spreadsheet. So there are two different options for what you can set this, for how you set this spreadsheet up for import. Okay. And the LibraryThing system will respond in two different ways. This is really important. So please make a note of this if you can. So if you just care about your ISBNs, right? If all you really need is for LibraryThing to read your ISBNs and just pull over the book data based on those, then it doesn't really matter what's in your spreadsheet as long as the ISBNs are there and correct and neatly laid out. Okay. The system should be able to pull those out of your file no matter what else you've done to it. Of course, I say that now and afterward, I'm sure I'll get an example that contradicts me. But the system's really good at pulling out just ISBN numbers. So that's option one, and it works really well. Option two is if you want any of this other information present, then you need to keep the sample file structure exactly as it is, right? You cannot add, delete, or rename any of these columns. They have to be exactly like this for LibraryThing to be able to read any of these other details, okay? So when you are on this page and you download this file, you may just want to delete this sample book and then start pasting your real information right into this file. Okay. And um, and you can leave columns blank. That's just fine. If you don't care about the publication date, you can leave this column blank and just fill in what you care about, but you don't want to delete any columns or rename any columns. Okay, that's really important. And if you don't do that, then it should import just fine. Okay. Uh, and it'll do its best to read these other things, right? So you'll notice there are some fields that you may want that aren't here. And if you run into that issue, feel free to reach out to me and I can talk you through some other options for getting those pieces of information into the system. But again, just keep the sample file exactly as it is if you want LibraryThing to capture any of these other details. And what does it look like to go through this process? Let me open up this spreadsheet here. Scrolling up, I'm going to drop it right here. There it is, and click upload. All right. And so now it's saying that it found one book in the file, and that's correct, right? We just looked at this file together and there was just one book in it. Excuse me. Now it's saying, just like before, that it wants us to choose our sources. So this is more important if you are just using that ISBN method, but it's good to complete this form no matter what method you're using. So first, it will try the Library of Congress unless I change this. And this is based on my settings, right? Yours will look different. Next, it'll try Amazon All Media, and then it'll try Amazon Books. Okay, so that's where LibraryThing, the order of sources that LibraryThing will look through. Next, I pick, okay, what collections do I want this import to be cataloged within? So do I want this one book to come into fiction? Maybe not. Maybe I just want it in my library. In fact, that book wasn't a work of fiction, so I really wouldn't want it there. Okay, so we're just going to add it to my library, and that's all. I can also add a tag to everything here. So you may actually have a tag that is sort of more specific that applies to your specific import you're doing, that's great. You may also choose to use a tag here to sort of track your import process in some way, right? Maybe it's like attempt one or something, and you can always delete that tag later. Or maybe it's the date, right? February 4th. I always capitalize the E in February on accident. It's every time. Okay, so those are quick ways to help find and identify the items that you've just imported, which can be useful. Okay, so I'm going to actually keep that February 4th one on there to show you. And then you just click Import Books. And the import's been submitted, and it might notify me when it's done. But either way, notification or not, it's going to eventually show up in your books when it's done. And since we're sorting by entry date, it'll show up right at the top here. Now, every now and then, we're actually in the process of upgrading our import system as well. So every now and then with the current system, you might notice that your import gets a little stuck. You're like, it's been kind of a while and I didn't have that many books in the file and it still isn't showing up. If that happens, wait an hour or so, and if it's still not there, reach out to me. It's totally possible that it got stuck and we can always kick it for you and make sure it gets through. Okay. But I've just refreshed the page and indeed there it is. So here's the book we just added, and I can see that tag. So I would be able to just click that tag and see all the books that I added. So yeah, there's lots of different ways you can sort of return to the things you just imported, but that's one nifty way. And you can always go to your tags and delete that tag. Oh, there we go. All right. Okay. So let's see what's next. MARC import. So if we go to the More page again and go back to import books, we can go into MARC files. So MARC files are a really common file type for libraries to use, especially when transferring systems, maybe from somewhere else to TinyCat. If you don't know what a MARC file is and you don't plan to use one, then don't worry about this too much, okay? So basically, you're just going to take whatever MARC file you have, your export of your old records, and you're going to just drag and drop it right into that. And you can label this import as well, right? Maybe attempt one, okay? Click upload. And it's giving us a preview right here because we're now in phase two of mapping this import. So it's going to say what different pieces of information, right? And it's also telling me how many records I have, but it's showing me what information is tied to which field and subfield, which I can use right down here. So here are three pieces of information that it won't include unless I tell it to. So if I want to include a custom barcode number here, right, which will be different from my ISBN barcode, then I can say, okay, where's the barcode for this record, right? Oh, great, that's the number on my barcode sticker. Perfect. So I know I just need this field and this subfield. So I go down here, 020, and it's highlighted it green for barcode, which is great. And the subfield is A. Great. And it found it just fine. Okay. So now LibraryThing will know that in my crazy MARC file from wherever I got it, this is the field that I want in my barcode section in LibraryThing. Okay. That's called mapping. And you can do that for comments and other call numbers as well. Okay, going on to the next phase, it's got a question for me. It's saying it found three books, and it's also saying that all three of those books happen to already be in my catalog, right? Which is true. And so, you will probably come across this at some point if you do multiple imports that, oh, maybe a book accidentally ended up in multiple imports. That's okay, right? Maybe you want to actually update the data that you had previously stored for that book. Maybe there are some corrections, or you've changed the barcode numbers or something. Maybe you did not mean to include it, and you can just skip any duplicates. Okay. Or, and this is important, we'll actually talk a lot about this later, but maybe you want to create a duplicate book so that you can actually circulate both records independently in TinyCat. And you would only do that if you actually had multiple copies of that book, right? So a duplicate record uh, could be an accident and you only actually have one. Or it could be like, yeah, there's three records of this book in here because I have three copies of this book, right? So we'll talk more about that later. So I'm going to go ahead and tell it to create a duplicate book. Again, we pick our collections. So maybe I'll just say put it in my library, not fiction. And then, or maybe, I'm adding it to our favorites or whatever. And then I can also add a tag, right? So I'm going to go ahead and add February 4th again. Okay. And it's checking that I've actually spelled that right. If you add multiple, just put a comma. And then I submit. Okay. And now it's processing. And I'll probably get a notification again when that is complete. So I can go back to my Your Books page and oh, it looks like they've already started coming through. Yep, there are the three books. There we go. So nice and quick that time. That's great. Okay, so let's just see what's next here in our little list. So from this page, again, you can edit some of the things that have just come through. And after you do an import, and also even after you add books one at a time, you might want to comb through the records and just make sure that things look how you want them and that the data is accurate to what you actually have in your library, at least as much as you care about, to the level that you care about at your library. Okay. So again, we might have duplicate, and I'm going to show you how to edit books here in a bit, but I just want to talk a little bit more about duplicates. So during this import, it mentioned that these books were duplicates, right? So where do you go once you've added your books? Where do you go to look at all of your duplicate books? Okay, there's actually a special page for that here. So I'm going to go to my home page. And I'm going to go to charts and graphs. And then it's going to be right at the bottom of this column on the left. So I'm going to scroll, scroll, and there it is, work duplicates. And I'm going to pause here for a second to explain two really important terms that we use often in LibraryThing. You're going to hear these words a lot, so try and remember the difference between these. So in LibraryThing, a book exists on two levels. There's what we call the work level and the book level. So the work level is sort of like the idea of Great Expectations, right? It's every edition of Great Expectations. It's every version and every format of Great Expectations. Okay. And that's the work. It's everybody's copy of it all at once, right? And then the book level for that is like your edition, your copy of Great Expectations, the physical one you have, which can have very specific data that you control. You can control data on both levels, which is important to know. So there are some things that if you change, they'll change for everybody. And there's some things that you could change that'll just change for you. For example, if you change your title for your specific book, that'll just change for your book, right? There's a different place that we're not going to touch on today where you could correct, if need be, the canonical title for a work, okay? So the work is like everyone's Great Expectations, and the book is like your copy or copies of Great Expectations. So those are the two levels. So here it's saying that we have duplicates of these works, right? And here are our duplicate books, right? So here I can see these are two different books, and two different editions, right, of the same work, right? So that might be correct, right? Any of these might be correct. You can have multiple uh, copies of a book in a library, right? And if that's true, then you do want to see duplicates here. But it could also be a mistake, right? So from this page, you can manage these duplicates, you can merge things, you can delete things. So it's a really useful page during the cataloging process. I do recommend bookmarking this page as well, so that it's easy to return to. Okay, so why would you catalog two books, right? We've talked about this a little bit, but I want to explain why you would do that in TinyCat. So to do that, I want us to go to this book. And let's just say we're going to talk about editing books in great detail in just a moment, but I just want to scroll down here to the physical summary, number of copies. Because there are two different ways that you can catalog. Well, there's two different ways to note that you have multiple copies of a book, right? And one of them is just to say we have two copies of this, of Wuthering Heights, right? Or sorry, this is Great Expectations. Say we have two copies of Great Expectations. I can just save that. And now it's saying that I have two copies, right? But this won't actually create a second copy for me in the system. This will not create a duplicate record that acts independently in TinyCat. So that's super important, right? This is literally just a note from me or from me to my patrons. It's just a note saying that I have two copies in the library. But there's still just one record here. So how do you actually catalog a duplicate copy that you can circulate independently in TinyCat, right? And it's a really simple answer. In fact, we've already done it together today. You just add it again, right? So you can just add that book the same way you did the first time, whether that's through this form or the app or importing, it doesn't matter. You just add the book again, okay? And then you'll have multiple copies that will each show up in TinyCat when you get to TinyCat and you'll be able to circulate them independently. What do I mean when I say that? I mean that you can have one copy of Wuthering Heights checked out and the other one available, right? So that's a really important distinction. So you can note in that edit books form, like we just did, you can note how many you have, but that's just a note. To actually create multiple copies, be sure to actually add that book again, okay? However many times. So you can do it, if you have 6 copies, add it 6 times, okay? So now I want to talk about editing books. Okay, so let's go back to this book. And there are a couple ways I can edit it from here. I also can see my other copy right down here. That's nice. So I can click this edit book or this edit book. And actually, even from this other page, there's a pencil icon that I can click here to do the same thing. Okay, all of those just bring me to this form, which looks a lot like the add books form that we looked at earlier, right? So it's really similar. So on this page, when if I'm editing this book, maybe I just care about a couple things, or maybe I care about like most of this, and it's up to me. It's up to my library and our standards. So I might go through and delete that sort of series like note in the title if I need to. I might add other tags. I might say actually ours is a hardcover, or actually we have the audiobook, right? So there's a lot of different things you can edit here. I'm going to point out just three important things so as to not take up all of our time on this. Three important things that really matter in TinyCat, since this is, after all, a TinyCat webinar, right? So first thing first is the call numbers. So in LibraryThing, as you can see, you can actually catalog multiple call numbers per item. Okay. So I could have a Dewey Decimal number, a Library of Congress classification number, and my own personal custom call number if I wanted to for each of my items. However, in TinyCat, you'll actually be forced to choose one to display for all your items, right? So whichever one's most important to you that you're gonna want to display in TinyCat, if any, right? You don't have to display a call number in TinyCat, but if there is one you want to display, be sure that that's filled in here, whichever one it is, okay? The next thing is actually right below it that I want to point out. It's in this item comments section. We've got two really useful, kind of nifty fields. So a little context. In LibraryThing, the description for books is somewhat canonical, right? We often get those from like publishers and stuff. So they're hard to change. You can like upvote and downvote them, but in LibraryThing, you don't have a lot of control over what the description for a book says, right? And sometimes you'll notice that there might be like a weird kind of like coding issue, and there's like a kind of a maybe a typo or something that or a character that looks a little off. And coding's complicated, so that does happen from time to time. However, in TinyCat, you can, unlike in LibraryThing, in TinyCat, you can override those descriptions. So if you want to replace a description in TinyCat, just put your replacement here in summary. Okay. And then in TinyCat, there's a setting under your detail pages section. Um, settings, excuse me. And under your detail page settings, you can check a box that says, hey, whenever I've got something under summary, replace my description with whatever I've put here, right? And then if you don't put anything here, it won't replace the description. It'll display the standard one. Okay. And you don't have to include descriptions in TinyCat, but most libraries do. I mean, people want to know what the book's about. So this is a great way to correct, overwrite, or maybe it's not even that you're necessarily correcting a mistake, but maybe the description for a book just isn't quite what your patrons are interested in about that book, right? So there's lots of reasons you might want to replace that. The second cool feature here is comments. So in TinyCat, you'll actually get your very own customizable field. And this is there because lots of libraries have really unique items, right? That, we do our best to provide lots of useful fields for you to fill in and data for you to note for your books in a really customizable way. However, say you're cataloging a lot of games, okay? Um, so you might want to note somewhere in your TinyCat catalog the age range for those games, right? And we don't have an ages field in LibraryThing. So this is a place where you can capture that information. So in TinyCat, whatever you put under comments here, let's say we're going to write six and up, right? Whatever I put here, I can include in TinyCat. And the default for that field is going to say local notes. But in your settings, you can rename that field to whatever you want. So I might rename that if I have a lot of games to ages. So then in TinyCat, once I save this, if I've included that field in TinyCat, it will display ages 6 and up, right? It's pretty nifty. So those are a couple cool things to note about editing books for TinyCat and keeping TinyCat in mind. I also want to point out that this is where the custom barcode is. So if you're using a barcode besides the ISBN barcode for circulation or just book lookup for any reason, this is where you'll put that. Okay. And just always make sure to click save because you don't want to undo the work you've just put in. All right. And now what if we want to change the cover image, right? We just changed a bunch of written details, but the cover image did not get captured in that, which is good because there's actually a lot on this page and it would totally swamp the edit book page. So it's got its own separate page when you want to edit your cover image. So I could add my own cover image, right? I just click this and I drop my image file there. However, if I have a book that I really want to take. This happens to me a lot because I have a lot of kind of like handmade books or custom made little things that I want to catalog in my real library, not in the sample one. Um, I end up taking a lot of pictures of my items. And what I like to do personally is I like to catalog it in LibraryThing on the web in as much detail as I care about. And then I like to go over to the app and go into my catalog and I open the book that I've just added and I just click this little camera icon. And when you click that icon, it lets you take a picture right there and then. It also lets you crop it in like kind of a nifty way, and then it uploads it automatically. So it's a lot smoother. It's like a much easier process to kind of switch over to the app if you're going to take some new photos of your item, okay? And again, that could be a cover image. It could also be like a picture of the iPod that you're circulating or whatever. It's fine. You could, instead of adding your own, you could pick from covers that other members have uploaded, right? And this is a popular book, of course, so we've got like 1,200 different cover images from members. So if you're picking one from members, you want to make sure to pick one that's really high quality, right? One of these green ribbons. In TinyCat, your covers are going to display pretty big, so you want to make sure it's got a lot of nice pixels in it versus like one of these brown ones with fewer pixels. Okay. Um, and you could pick from some Amazon covers as well. I believe there was a question about that in the chat that I didn't fully get a chance to read, but so you can avoid Amazon covers if you want to. Um, And then we also allow you to pick a default cover for when there isn't a cover image for your item. Okay. So if you're uploading something without a cover image, maybe it's like a digital article or something that like really doesn't have a cover image. Like the cover is just the first page. So you can change your default cover image to whatever you want, or you can pick a different one for each item as you please. But to change your default cover image, you just select one here. So this is the one that was already selected, but maybe I'll switch it to this. And then when I go to my books, you see that one didn't have it. So it's just switched it to that. So you can play around with that as much as you want to. Okay. And I want to show you, we're talking about editing books, right? So I want to show you a way to edit books en masse instead of just one at a time, right? And this is going to be more powerful in one sense, in the way that you're able to edit multiple things at once, but it's going to be less powerful in the sense that you can't edit as many things, okay? So you're a little restricted in what you can edit here. In this little lightning bolt button, which is called Power Edit. But it does let you edit multiple different items at the same time. So I've clicked that Power Edit button. I'm going to unclick it and click it again just to show you one more time what it looks like. And it's this sort of a extra bar up here at the top of the page. And from here, when I click on items, you see it just sort of highlights them. So it's selecting these items. So I can now select a few items and apply a single change to all of them at once, all of the ones that I've selected, right? So I could add a tag, right? Maybe if I had forgotten to add that February 4 tag, this would be a great way to do it without typing that a bunch of times, okay? I could also change the collections that it's in, right? And when I finish making my change, I just click change selected books, right? I can also select all of out of all my books, there are 100 on this page, 1 to 100. So I could select all 100 of those books to apply a change, or I could select all of my books at once, right? And saying, great, 250 books selected, right? So I can make sure that they're all in at least one collection or something, right? I could also delete all of my books that way, right? Which, scary. I could change media and language as well. So that's a good option if you want to make a lot of changes at once. I'm going to deselect all of my books. So a little pro tip here is sometimes I'll come back to my catalog and I'll try and click on a book and I'm like, why did it go green? And so just don't forget to exit Power Edit when you're done, okay? All right. So, you know what? I was able to cover most things through that hour, which is good. I'm glad we were able to. So when you're done cataloging your items, then, or even when you're sort of halfway through the process, it may be time for you to start your TinyCat trial, right? And at that point, you'll be able to start editing your settings and setting up your homepage so that it's something that your TinyCat patrons can come to and see your catalog in a way that you've set up for them. And this is an example of what that might look like, right? So here we can see the book that we've just added. So usually in our TinyCat webinars, we talk all about this website, right? The TinyCat side of this process and all of the settings involved in getting this just how we want it, okay? But obviously we don't have time to talk about that today. So thank you guys for coming to this special webinar. We will probably have another sort of special focused webinar in the future. But generally, every Wednesday at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, we host a regular tour of TinyCat where we talk about all the settings there. And we also answer more questions. We usually have more time for questions in that webinar.